You know, that feeling, that moment when you're staring down a task that feels, well, just a bit overwhelming. Maybe
Uh,
you're trying to improve a process at work or revise some really complex document, or maybe like the scenario we're going to dive into today, fundamentally rethink and improve something like an online course.
yeah, you've got this pile of feedback, maybe some ideas, some mandates.
Exactly. And you're just thinking, where do I even start? How do I make this truly better, not just fiddle with it?
It's so common. We often get handed a goal, like improve the course or increase efficiency, but the actual path forward,
It's murky. It's
yeah,
that classic ill-structured problem,
right. You kind of know where you want to end up, but the steps to get there aren't clear at all.
which makes it really easy just to tweak things around the edges instead of digging into the real opportunities.
And that feeling, that being overwhelmed or just not being sure you're even focusing on the right changes, that's exactly what we're tackling today.
We're going to look at how applying some really powerful principles from a book called Continuous Discovery Habits, or CDH, can bring, well, incredible clarity and structure to something like improving an online course.
And the interesting thing is, while we're using online courses as the example, this way of thinking, it reaches way beyond just education, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So to do this, we've got a really interesting stack of sources lined up.
Yeah, we've pulled some key excerpts from the Continuous Discovery Habits book itself. That gives us the sort of underlying theory, the structured approach to understanding user needs and creating value.
And we're pairing that theory with something really specific, a real-world application, City Vision University's course revision process.
Right. We have excerpts from their major course revision template and also as a specific example showing the template actually being used for a project management course, BUS 602402.
So we get both the theory and how it looks on the ground.
Exactly. These documents show how an institution is actually trying to take these deep discovery principles and operationalize them, make them part of the process for improving their courses.
So our mission for this deep dive is really to pull out the essential insights from all this.
Yeah, we want to understand how this structured approach, especially its focus on understanding the problem, or what CDH calls the opportunity space, before you even think about solutions, how that can genuinely transform course improvement.
And we're particularly interested in how observation and sort of careful framing help identify those opportunities students might not even be able to articulate, right? Like needing extra support, scaffolding.
Exactly. Those hidden needs. It's about providing a kind of roadmap, really, to making more impactful changes by focusing on the right things and, crucially, in the right order.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Continuous discovery habits. The title itself suggests it's not a one-off project.
Right. It's about building ongoing practices, habits.
And the book, it makes it clear it's teaching the how, this sort of repeatable process, not just listing what successful teams end up doing.
That how is so critical. Lots of books or frameworks describe high-performing teams. They're customer-centric, they iterate, they build the right stuff, but they often don't give you the clear, practical, day-to-day process.
Like, how do you actually do that discovery work consistently?
Exactly. And CDH tries to fill that gap by outlining specific habits that, say, product teams can adopt.
Okay. And a really foundational habit it talks about is this big shift in perspective, moving from an output mindset to an outcome mindset.
This might be the single most important concept from CDH to really get your head around.
Okay, so what's the difference? Output versus outcome.
Okay, so an output is simply something you deliver. You write a new section for the course, you add a feature to the software, you publish a report. It's the thing you made.
Got it. The deliverable.
Right. An outcome, though, as Josh Seiden defines it in the book, is a change in human behavior that drives business results. It's the impact that your output actually has on the people using it. And importantly, how that impact, that change in their behavior, helps the organization achieve its broader goals.
So the danger with just focusing on outputs is you get so wrapped up in completing the task, finishing the update, checking off the feature list,
Right.
that you lose sight of whether it actually changed anything for the better. You shipped it, great. But did it help anyone? Did it move the needle?
Right.
And the sources give a really clear, though, pretty unfortunate example of what happens when you chase an outcome metric, but it's not grounded in positive customer behavior change.
You're talking about the Wells Fargo example.
Yeah. The bank wanted to increase the average number of accounts per customer. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a legitimate business outcome, right? More accounts, maybe more revenue.
Seems reasonable. But the way they incentivized employees was purely based on the number of accounts opened. They were almost treating the number of accounts as the output. the thing to
Yeah.
deliver.
Without making sure those accounts were actually valuable or needed by the customer.
Exactly. And the result, the outcome they actually got was deeply negative.
Hmm.
Employees felt pressured. They opened fraudulent accounts.
So the behavior change wasn't in the customers finding value, it was in the employees trying to hit a target.
Precisely. Driven by misguided incentives. The business result wasn't growth, it was fraud and massive reputational damage. It's a really harsh lesson about making sure your desired outcome is linked to creating real value for the people you serve.
What I find really interesting here is how this connects to Peter Drucker's idea, which is also mentioned. He suggested the goal of business is to convert society's needs into opportunities for profitable business.
Hmm.
Which kind of flips the script, doesn't it? It's not about business goals versus customer needs. It's about achieving business goals by effectively meeting customer needs.
Exactly. Serving the customer is the engine that drives value for the organization. It aligns the two, rather than seeing them in conflict.
When you frame your outcomes around positive changes in customer behavior that come from meeting their needs, it just seems like a much healthier, more sustainable way to operate.
It absolutely is.
So let's bring this back to the specifics. How does this whole outcome mindset translate to improving an online course, especially looking at those City Vision University templates?
Well, it applies really directly and I think quite elegantly. City Vision University, like any school, has core outcomes it's striving for.
Right?
And the sources actually highlight their specific high-level outcomes related to their students. There are two main ones. First, transforming the lives of the students themselves.
Okay.
And second, enabling those students through effective organizations and programs they might lead or work in to then transform the lives of their clients or communities.
Wow, okay. Those are definitely outcomes in the CDH sense. They're about significant changes in human behavior capability.
Transformed lives, increased effectiveness.
And those drive the institution's overall mission and impact.
Yes, those are the ultimate business results for CVU, if you want to use that language. So when you're revising a course, the goal isn't just to, say, update the readings or add a new video. Those are just outputs.
Right.
The real goal, from this outcome perspective, is to make changes that are designed to better contribute to those larger student and societal outcomes. A revised assignment isn't just busy work. It should be a task designed to build a specific skill or understanding that fuels that student transformation or their ability to lead effectively.
So the course revision process itself becomes a kind of discovery process, discovering the best ways to make changes that actually move the needle on those student outcomes.
Exactly that. It's about being really intentional, moving beyond just surface updates, to deeply think about how every single piece of the course contributes to the learning and the behavioral outcomes you want to see.
Okay, so we start with the outcome, the desired change in student behavior, their capabilities. CDH then provides a framework to guide us from that outcome to the actual work we need to do on the course. Can you walk us through that structure?
Sure. For the core framework, you could visualize it with something called an opportunity solution tree, maybe. But at its heart, it's about moving sequentially, though. It can be iterative from outcome to opportunity space,
Okay.
to solutions.
Okay.
So, like we discussed, you anchor everything in the desired outcome, the impact you want to create.
So for that project management course example, BUS 602402, the big outcome is student transformation, organizational effectiveness. But there are also smaller lesson-level outcomes too, right?
Absolutely.
Like the template mentions objectives about illustrating concepts, reviewing processes, creating a project charter, demonstrating proficiency in planning.
Exactly. Those lesson-level objectives are like nearer-term outcomes that feed into the bigger goals. The specific behavioral changes or skills you want students to walk away with from that particular unit or week.
Okay, so once you know that outcome, big or small, the next step in the CDH framework is discover and map the opportunity space. You said this is critical.
It's absolutely critical. This is often the step people skip or rush through.
And what exactly is the opportunity space?
Okay, think of it like the landscape of needs, pain points, desires that exist for your customer in this case.
Yeah.
The student that lie between where they are now and achieving that desired outcome. It's the set of problems you could potentially solve for them or needs you could meet that would actually help them make that behavioral change or gain that skill. For course revision, it's about understanding the student's experience as they try to learn. Where do they struggle? What confuses them? What skills are they missing that stop them from, say, managing a project effectively?
This feels like where that ill-structured problem idea comes back in. The outcome might be clear, but the reason students aren't getting there or the best ways to help them, those aren't always obvious.
That's exactly right. And mapping the opportunity space is the work you do to bring structure to that fuzzy middle ground.
Yeah.
It's about deeply understanding the student's journey, their perspective, and identifying the key areas where you have an opportunity to intervene to help them succeed.
Okay.
And only after you have a really solid understanding of this opportunity space, the landscape of student needs and challenges related to the course, then you move to the third step. Discover solutions.
Ooh, so the solutions, the specific course changes, the new content, the revised assignment, they only come after you really understand the opportunities they're supposed to address.
Precisely. That opportunity solution tree visualization I mentioned shows this kind of hierarchy. You have the outcome at the root, then it branches down into key opportunity areas, like maybe students struggle with applying planning tools.
Okay.
That might break down further into sub-opportunities, like students are confused by the work breakdown structure, or students find it hard to estimate task durations.
Right.
And then, way down at the leaves of the tree, that's where you find the potential solutions. Add a WBS video tutorial, provide a task duration estimation guide, things like that. It ensures your solutions are always tied back through a specific student need or problem to the overall outcome you're aiming for.
So in this context, the students are our customers, and understanding their experience is the key to mapping that opportunity space. Now, CDH puts a lot of emphasis on how you gather this information, often through interviews. But the sources also highlight that just asking people direct questions, well, it isn't always the most reliable way to get insights.
This is such a critical point from the book, and it's backed up by a lot of behavioral science. When you ask customers, what do you want? Or even, why did you do that? You often get answers that are, well, rationalizations, or ideas limited by what they already know.
Like the Steve Jobs quote about customers asking for a faster horse instead of imagining a car.
Exactly. People tend to frame their needs within their current reality. It's hard to imagine something totally new.
And the sources bring in that research by Michael Gazzaniga on the left brain interpreter. That's just fascinating. Our brains literally make up stories to explain our actions after we've done them.
It's kind of mind-blowing, right? The left hemisphere is like this internal press secretary, taking all the available information and spinning a coherent narrative that makes sense of our actions and feelings.
So when you ask someone why they did something,
Their brain quickly generates a plausible-sounding reason. It feels true to them in that moment, even if it's not the real, complex mix of factors that actually led to the action.
so people aren't necessarily lying.
No, not usually. Their brain is just giving you a neat story. Plus, people might tell you what they think you want to hear, or they describe their ideal self, how they wish they behaved, rather than their actual habits or struggles.
Okay, so if direct questions like, what do you need? Or why did you struggle? Can be unreliable, what does CDH suggest instead?
It emphasizes two things, mainly. Asking for specific stories about past experiences. Like, tell me about the last time you tried to create a project plan. What was that like? Walk me through it.
Getting concrete details.
Exactly. And just as importantly, observing behavior. What people actually do and the specific situations they describe, those are often much more revealing than their generalized answers or opinions.
Okay, so stories and observation. That's the core CDH approach to insight gathering. Now, how does the City Vision University template connect here? Because it doesn't seem like they're doing formal sit-down interviews with students for every course revision.
Right. And this is where their process is a really interesting adaptation. They're not doing formal discovery interviews in the way a software team might. Instead, they're leveraging the rich stream of data and interaction that happens naturally and continuously throughout the course delivery.
Ah, okay. So the faculty aren't scheduling separate interviews. They're building discovery habits into how they already interact with students and look at course data.
Precisely. Look at those Week X observations sections in the Major Course Revision template and in the BUS 602402 example. These aren't just random note fields. They're structured categories designed to capture exactly the kinds of real-time observation and feedback that reveal that student opportunity space.
Let's break those down. What are they looking for?
Okay, so you've got questions from students. This is a direct signal of confusion, ambiguity, something not being clear. If you see a cluster of similar questions about the same concept or assignment week after week, that's a huge flag, an opportunity.
Makes sense. What else?
Content feedback. Did students comment that a reading was unclear, a video outdated, A link broken? That's direct feedback on friction points with the actual learning materials.
Okay.
And assignment discussions feedback. Are the instructions confusing? Are students struggling with the discussion prompts? Maybe their submitted work shows common misunderstandings of key ideas the assignment was supposed to teach or assess. That points to opportunities around the activities themselves.
Right. The things designed to help them learn and apply.
Exactly. Then there's workload, difficulty, and student experience feedback. Comments or patterns showing an assignment takes way too long, or a concept feels overwhelmingly hard, or just the overall flow of the course is frustrating. That signals opportunities around pacing, support, streamlining things.
And the last one.
Other feedback. Basically a catch-all for anything else observed about how students are engaging or struggling or succeeding in the course.
So the faculty's day-to-day work being in the discussion forums, answering emails, grading assignments, looking at end-of-course surveys, that's the continuous flow of observation and feedback. That's what fills these sections.
Yes, that's City Vision's method for gathering the equivalent of those customer stories and observations that CDH talks about.
And this is where it gets really powerful for identifying those needs students don't directly state, like the need for scaffolding.
Exactly. Because, let's be honest, a student is very unlikely to email their professor and say, "Excuse me, I believe I require additional scaffolding regarding the application of work breakdown structure principles in the week 3 assignment."
Rock stuff.
Probably not.
They just feel stuck or frustrated or confused. Their feedback might be more like, "I don't get how to start the project plan," or "This assignment took forever and I'm still not sure it's right."
Or you see it in their discussion posts, maybe revealing a common misunderstanding about a planning step.
Right. But if the week X observations for, let's say, week 3 of that project management course, the week focused on planning, creating a charter, discussing challenges, consistently show certain patterns. Like multiple students asking variations of how detailed should the tasks be, or discussion posts expressing anxiety about estimating timelines, or submitted charters that lacked structure or missed key components, or survey feedback specifically calling out the week 3 assignment as really difficult.
Okay, so it's the cluster of observations. Yes. That cluster, those different data points pointing in the same direction, collectively reveal an opportunity. The students aren't using the word scaffolding, but their behavior, their questions, their work, it's all screaming that they need more support, more structure, maybe more examples, to bridge the gap between theory and practice.
So the opportunity isn't students need scaffolding. The opportunity is something like students are struggling to apply WBS principles in the week 3 assignment.
Exactly. And then adding scaffolding like a template or video walkthrough or breaking it down becomes a potential solution to address that observed opportunity.
That's that idea from CDH again about reading things that are not yet on the page, interpreting the patterns to uncover the underlying need.
Especially for scaffolding needs. Things like breaking down complex tasks, providing templates, offering worked examples. These are often responses to needs that students reveal through struggle, not through direct requests.
And the CVU template structure really helps here by making space to capture all those observations first before you even think about changes.
It makes those invisible struggles visible. It gathers the evidence you need to identify the real opportunities for improvement.
Okay, this structured approach outcomes, then mapping the opportunity space through observation, then solutions, it makes a lot of sense. But the sources really hammer home the point about why you absolutely must separate those middle steps, understanding the problem and opportunity, from the final step of identifying solutions. It's not just a nice idea, it's crucial.
It's absolutely critical. And honestly, it's probably the hardest habit to actually build because, like you said, our brains are wired for closure. We see a problem, we want to fix it.
Now, we jump to the first solution that pops into our head.
Right. But CDH warns strongly against that. It's dangerous.
Why so dangerous? What's the risk?
Well, jumping to solutions too early, before you've really explored the opportunity space, it blinds you to other possibilities. And it makes you really susceptible to cognitive biases.
Like confirmation bias.
Exactly. Once you latch onto an idea for a solution, you start unconsciously looking for evidence that confirms it's a great idea, and you ignore or downplay evidence that suggests it might not be. And then there's escalation of commitment. You've already put some thought or effort into your first idea, so you feel invested. You're more likely to stick with it, even if warning signs appear, just because you've already started down that path.
That Portland housing example from the book really drives this home, doesn't it? It's quite a stark failure.
It really is. The city and developers had a clear goal: help families displaced by development find housing back in their original neighborhood. They saw the problem.
Hmm.
These families need housing.
Okay.
But they didn't properly investigate the opportunity space. They didn't deeply understand the specific needs, the family sizes, the circumstances of the actual families they were trying to serve. Instead, they jumped straight to a solution. Let's build 1 to 2 bedroom condos.
And the reality was completely different.
Completely. It turned out most of the families were larger, multi-generational, needing 4 or more bedrooms. They built a solution based on a totally untested, incorrect assumption about the opportunity, about the actual need.
So the condos sat empty, the families weren't helped.
Right. Wasted resources, failed outcome. They essentially designed the product before they understood the customer. A classic case of jumping to solutions.
So how does the City Vision University template structure actively prevent that kind of premature jump?
It's built right into the flow. The separation of the steps is intentional. Look at steps 1 and 2 again.
Okay. Step 1 is weekly observations.
Right. Gathering the raw data from students during the course, the questions, feedback, struggles.
And step 2 is course revision export consolidation.
Yeah, that's where you review other course data, maybe grades, activity levels, and you pull together all those observations from step 1. You look for patterns, you analyze the feedback. This is the process of mapping the opportunity space, figuring out where the struggles are, what's unclear, what gaps exist, which assignments are causing problems. It's the problem-finding, opportunity framing stage, and it's rooted in the evidence you just collected.
And only after completing all of that, after documenting and analyzing the student experience, then the template says move to step 3.
Exactly. Step 3, actionable steps. And notice that little note in parentheses, only after step 2. That's not accidental.
That's a deliberate pause.
It forces the faculty member doing the revision to stop, step back from the observations and the opportunities they've identified, and then, with that full understanding in hand, then start brainstorming and proposing the specific changes, the actionable steps, the solutions.
So the structure helps make sure that the solutions proposed in step 3 aren't just random ideas or knee-jerk reactions.
Right. They should be directly tied back to the specific opportunities for improvement that were uncovered through that systematic observation and analysis in steps 1 and 2.
So if step 2 analysis clearly shows, say, a recurring problem with students figuring out project budgets, that's the opportunity identified.
And step 3 is where you list potential actionable steps, the solutions, to address that specific opportunity. Maybe add a video tutorial on budgeting. Maybe provide a template. Maybe add a smaller practice budgeting activity earlier in the course.
The separation ensures the solutions are aimed at validated opportunities, including those unspoken needs for scaffolding that you only saw because students were struggling.
It stops you from just adding a paragraph about budgeting because you think it might be helpful. Instead, you're adding it because the student data from last time showed they specifically struggled with budgeting.
Moving from assumption-based changes to evidence-based improvement.
Exactly. And the template structure actively supports that by forcing that separation. Understand the problem space deeply before you design the solution.
Okay, so we've gone from outcome to understanding the opportunity space through observation, separating that from solutioning. Now, once we are in step 3, thinking about those actionable steps, CDH also has guidance on how to approach generating those solutions, right? It's not just finding one solution.
Right. Once you have a clear opportunity defined, or maybe a prioritized list of them, the CDH approach really encourages generating multiple potential solutions for each one.
Why multiple?
Well, research actually shows that generating a higher volume of ideas, especially up front, tends to lead to more diverse and ultimately more original and effective solutions. Your first idea is very rarely your best or most innovative one.
That's where looking outside your own little bubble can help, like the examples they give of Velcro coming from observing burrs, or job boards borrowing ideas from e-commerce sites.
Yeah, thinking about analogous problems. How do other fields solve similar challenges? How do they teach complex multi-step processes? How do they provide support for applying knowledge? Looking at, say, how a different industry does training, or even how a video game onboards new players, might spark totally different ideas for structuring a course module or scaffolding an assignment.
So applying this to the CVU template step 3, the actionable steps, if the faculty identify that students consistently struggle with maybe applying project scheduling techniques, that's the opportunity.
They shouldn't just default to the simplest fix, like add more text explaining scheduling.
Right.
They should brainstorm a range of potential actionable steps. Could we create an interactive scheduling exercise? Provide a tutorial for a simple scheduling tool? Add a peer review component for schedules. Maybe bring in a short video from a guest speaker talking about real-world scheduling challenges. Offer different levels of templates.
Generate several distinct ideas first.
Yeah, generate options before you start evaluating and deciding which one or maybe which combination to actually pursue further revision.
Now, the CVU template structure guides when to brainstorm solutions only after step 2. But it doesn't seem to go into the detailed techniques for brainstorming or testing assumptions that CDH covers, like testing desirability, viability, feasibility, usability.
True. The template is more of a practical application framework, not a full CDH implementation guide. But the underlying principle is definitely there.
How so?
Well, the expectation when listing those actual steps in step 3 is that they are thoughtful proposals. Faculty would implicitly, or maybe explicitly in their own notes, consider, is this change actually feasible within our learning platform? Are students likely to engage with it? Does it seem likely to actually address the struggle we observed?
That touches on feasibility, usability, desirability, effectiveness.
So even if not formally testing assumptions with prototypes or surveys of the solutions, the structure encourages moving beyond just the first easiest idea.
Exactly. It pushes for more considered solutions grounded in the observed problems.
And then the final piece of this is the continuous part of continuous discovery habits. This isn't a one-and-done fix. No, absolutely not. It's designed as a loop, a cycle. Course revision shouldn't be something you do once every few years and then forget about.
And the CVU template structure seems to support that continuity.
It does, inherently. Because the observations gathered during one run of the course, captured in step 1, become the direct input, the foundation, for identifying opportunities for the next major revision. It creates a constant cycle. Observe, identify opportunities, generate solutions, implement changes, then observe the impact of those changes in the next course delivery, and repeat.
It feeds itself. And CDH also emphasizes showing your work, right? Communicating the why behind the changes.
Absolutely. Transparency is key. And the CVU template process helps with that too. By documenting the week X observations, the evidence, and then clearly linking them to the proposed actionable steps in step 3, the solutions, it creates a clear narrative.
You can basically say, look, based on these specific student struggles we saw last term, we're proposing these specific changes for next term.
Precisely. It helps communicate the rationale behind the revision. It builds shared understanding, maybe among faculty or with administrators. Everyone can see the problems the changes are intended to solve because the discovery work that led to them is documented.
Okay, this deep dive has really brought to light how applying these structured discovery principles, like the ones in continuous discovery habits, offers a really powerful way to get beyond just tinkering with something like an online course.
Yeah, it forces that shift in focus, away from just updating content, the output, and towards genuinely impacting student learning and ultimately contributing to those bigger outcomes, like transforming lives and enabling students to make a difference.
It really demands that we intentionally observe, collect feedback, analyze the student experience as it's happening. That's the work of mapping the opportunity space.
Identifying where the friction is, where things are unclear, where students need more support, more scaffold.
And crucially, it provides a framework like we see reflected in the City Vision University template for deliberately separating that whole problem-finding, opportunity-spotting process from the process of actually generating solutions.
And that discipline, that separation, helps make sure the changes we propose, the actionable steps, are really designed to address validated student needs and opportunities, including those really important subtle needs for scaffolding that students might not say directly, but that you see when you observe their struggles.
It feels like a shortcut, not because it's less work, maybe, but because it leads to more effective results.
Exactly. It increases effectiveness. It leads to course improvements that are much more likely to hit the mark, to achieve those desired learning outcomes, because they're built on the reality of the student experience, not just on assumptions.
And understanding this framework, this way of thinking, it's so valuable far beyond just course design, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's a way to approach improving any process, developing any product, providing any service.
By focusing intently on understanding the needs, the struggles, the desires of the people you're trying to serve before you jump to conclusions about how to fix things.
You just dramatically increase your chances of making a real positive impact.
Yeah.
You solve the right problems.
Okay, so let's leave you, the listener, with this thought to mull over, building on everything we've talked about. If we accept that our natural tendency is often to jump straight to solutions, and that we're all susceptible to biases like confirmation bias that can kind of derail us, how can you, in your own work, in your own team context, actively build in structures or habits, or maybe just pauses into your process, how can you make sure you dedicate enough time and effort to truly understanding the problem or the opportunity space before you start brainstorming fixes or solutions?
What's maybe one small thing you could do differently this week? One small way you could commit to observing more carefully or framing problems differently before deciding what action to take?